Okay, so hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Flow Global. This is where we connect with global first entrepreneurs and tech experts from all around the world. Our guest today is Ashwin Baskaran, VP of Engineering at Zero X. Ashwin, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Vit. Thank you for having me. Good morning to you as well.
Ashwin, you've got a wealth of experience in engineering, right? So with a background at companies like VMware, like at Citrix, Cisco. So could you briefly maybe walk us through your career journey?
Sure. We could spend the whole hour talking about that. So I've been in the industry since the mid '90s or so. So a lot of variety because the industry has been changing through the course of that time. So I started off doing some protocol development for satellite networks way back when. I dabbled in telecom, and then I spent almost 20 years in infrastructure companies. So basically, networking and security primarily. So that was I did that at a startup for a few years, and obviously spent a lot of time at Citrix and then VMware, and then most recently, about a year and a half ago, trying something new with moving into crypto.
So, actually, you have seen this evolution, I guess, of global engineering practices during your time at Cisco, yeah, VMware. So those companies that are they're truly kind of global first companies with teammates all around the world, right? So also Zero X Labs, the uh, has teammates in different countries, as far as I know. So can you share maybe some specific moment where understanding a regional like a tech trend or cultural nuance influence somehow your project at maybe Zero X Labs or in your previous roles?
That's an interesting question. Um, I think one of the core learnings is that there's always a center of gravity in the company. It's maybe where the company was founded. It's maybe where the company has the most employees. It's maybe where the senior leaders of the company are. And that tends to drive the cultural practices of that company. And so I think, for example, when I was at Citrix, which was probably the first global experience that I really had. Obviously, Cisco was already a global company, but I was a relatively junior IC at the time, and I didn't have a lot of interaction with people in other geographies. Um, and you find that you have, for example, one of the I think it was maybe the CTO or the chief strategy person for Citrix was based in Australia at the time. And so you ended up kind of interacting a lot with them, hearing a lot from them. They were obviously driving some of the technical direction of the company. And you could see that, maybe they have a certain way of talking or working or the certain hours that they keep or things like that. Um, One of the things we found, or at least I found interesting at the time because I was still new to this, was yeah, they can be quite informal. And growing up in India, there's definitely more formality that I was used to. India's changed a lot, but at the time there was a little more formality, and of course the U.S. A lot of the tech giants are US based companies, so obviously there's a lot of US based culture that comes in, and then as you spend time, you kind of see like, yeah, there's kind of this difference between West Coast and East Coast companies. Maybe the New York, Boston-based companies have a little bit different culture than like the Silicon Valley companies, and so you start to see these nuances. You start to see a little bit of how that impacts the way the company operates, right? So do you wear casual clothing when you go into the office, or do you wear slightly, business casual when you go in? Do you go on first name basis with the CEO the first day, or do you wait a few days? Things like that. So you pick up on those nuances. But I think Citrix was the point where I really kind of started to see these things because it was truly global, and we had US based company, large presence in India, large presence in China, presence in the UK, and important sort of company leaders based in Australia. So you really see the influence of these different cultures in just your day to day, how you work and who you work with.
And reflecting on your journey from major tech companies to leading at Zero X Labs, how have you adjusted your engineering leadership style to keep up with this fast changing tech world?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the main difference in some sense is, are you personally comfortable not knowing everything? In sometimes in large companies, large groups, what tends to happen is there's a lot of communication. There's sort of like weekly reviews and project updates to be presented to different people and so on. At VMware, for example, VMware now, of course, it's Broadcom, but VMware when I was there was I think at its about 40,000 people, and so there are several layers of sort of oversight of the business units, right? So you do a project, well, you have to report it internally, you have to report it outside your business unit. Maybe something has to be coordinated with other business units, so there's another layer to be coordinated. So there's a lot of coordination that happens. Again, it's not good or bad. It's just at scale, you're trying to coordinate the efforts of maybe 500 engineers or 2,000 engineers. Yeah, you need some of that coordination overhead. At a small company, obviously we don't need it because I can talk individually with everybody daily if I want to. We're only about 20 engineers right now, so that's quite easy, right? That part is not the problem. So here the problem is more, even though you have a small team, the team is actually quite diverse in terms of their skill sets and their experience levels, and more specifically, the type of technology that they work in. So a lot of and we only have one other engineering manager, so a lot of the team reports directly to me, and so yeah, there's kind of this, you just have to get comfortable. I think most people can do it. There's probably a small number of people who never get comfortable not knowing all the detail. So you just have to get comfortable with that. You have to be able to trust your team, and we have a fantastic team here, so that's a very high level of trust. But once you do that, I think then you can avoid having to do a lot of oversight management kind of stuff, and you can just trust the team, and you can focus on other things like providing good context and things like that.
Okay, and that's a very good point. And speaking about the trust itself, right? So how um, can you share a challenging experience you've had while managing remote engineering teams, like, and how you dealt with that? Was it like about trust, or there were some other issues?
Well, yeah, I think just to maybe take a step back, I think I've been working with teams that are in different locations for a long time, probably 15 years or so. But usually it has been, okay, we have three sites or we have two sites or something like that. Okay, you have, I don't know, US based and India based team, or US, India, Australia, or something like that. And that has a very different dynamic than sort of a distributed team where there are individuals not working in an office, they're working out of their home in different geos, different time zones. And really, of course, like a lot of people, my first experience of that was when COVID hit and everybody kind of started working from home. And I think there's probably, one big change from that, which is often people pick up on like level of engagement of a person, of an employee, based on how they interact. Like, what is their body language? Are they participating in the meeting? Are they coming to the meetings on time? Or are they interacting with colleagues and eating lunch with them? You kind of pick up on those types of things, and you rely on those things to decide whether somebody is really engaged in what they're doing or not. And obviously, all of a sudden, like one fine day, we couldn't do that anymore. um, and I think there's some certainly some challenges that I've experienced that, to be honest, don't know if we'll ever have a great answer. But it came down to sort of really challenging yourself as a manager to think about, okay, how do I really know whether the person is contributing and doing sort of satisfying their responsibility? Not just are they friendly and are they talking to you every day and showing up to meetings on time, but are they actually producing useful things? And the big insight there, to me, is that because you cannot see where this work is happening, you cannot see people interacting in front of you all the time. You really have to rely on other signals. So you have to rely on what people are saying about their colleagues, right? And so to me, one of the sort of subtle learnings has been, really asking people to talk to you about, who has been helping them, who has been inspiring them, who has been solving their problems for them, who's showing up when they need somebody for an incident, and really kind of leaning on people to talk about that, talk about their colleagues. And I think that helps in many dimensions, because one of the sort of the positive side effects of that is people are thinking more carefully about who's helping them, and it's creating a more positive environment where where people kind of are seeing how they're helping each other.
Hmm.
And it's usually small things. Many companies have this. We have it as well, where there's a team channel on Slack, which is just for
Yeah.
people to thank each other, right? Or to give a shout out to somebody.
Hmm.
This has become pretty common in a remote world,
Yeah.
and it just, the level of activity on those channels actually helps you understand, like, you see everybody's thanking the same person, or something like that. And over time you see people get really good at writing this. They don't just say, oh, thank you for being an awesome dude, be like, hey, you really do a good job of this, or you helped me on this particular thing because you have this particular skill. And that really helps you understand the team in a in a pretty deep way.
Yeah.
Just to round it out, I think there are other things you learn, like asynchronous versus synchronous working
Hmm.
styles,
Hmm.
etc., especially when you have time zones to deal with. But I think I wanted to share this one because it's a little more subtle thing that
Yeah.
was not obvious to me. And it's only after doing it for a while I said, okay, this is why this helps. This is why this actually works.
Yeah, and you've recently talked about assessing organizational health with these four C's, right? Control, competence, clarity, and capacity, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Can you talk more about this approach?
Sure, sure. So, I think one of the things you learn as you go, like, people talk about, okay, what's the value of experience? And I think basically it comes down to you start to build some simple formula, right? You say you take a complex situation and you can break it down in some way that works for you. There's no standard way to break things down, but it helps you kind of just assess, like, what's actually happening. Are we in good shape? How do we deal with, there's 20 people, or maybe you have 200 people. How do you actually figure out, like, what's actually happening, and which team is doing well, which team is not doing well? And it's very easy to look at the outputs. Does it look like they're shipping? Are they having lots of trouble? Are there quality problems with what they ship, etc.? And it's much harder to figure out what's the inputs, what's actually happening, why are they having these bad outcomes. um, and so this is just from, I was trying to think about, okay, how do you actually figure out, who's responsible for this thing? Like, if there's a bad outcome, who's responsible? If there's a good outcome, who's responsible? And it's, you don't want to just, like, oh, this engineering manager is not a good engineering manager, or this lead is not good, or this engineer is not good. That's easy, to fall into that kind of thinking. It looks visible, it looks obvious. Oh, look, they're not shipping. So that's where that thinking came from, right? It's also heavily, the core idea came from a really, really great book. I highly recommend it. I loved it, called "Turn the Ship Around," and it's actually by a submarine captain from the U.S. Navy, and talking about how he turned around a badly performing submarine, right? If for whatever reason the submarine got into really bad culture, and sort of he talks about how he got it out. So many of the core ideas are from there, and it's just a way to say, okay, there are probably at least these four things that need to be healthy for a team to do a good job. For example, if a team doesn't have capacity, that's an easy one. If they're just being pushed, stretched beyond their limits, of course they're not going to do a good job. There's no surprise. So at least you should ask yourself the question, do they really have the capacity to do their job? Do they have enough people, right? And similarly, competence is another kind of subtle one, right? If the team is doing something new that they have not done before, are you giving them the time to develop the competence, or are you helping them develop the competence? It could be as simple as training, but it could be more nuanced, right? Maybe they just need time to explore an area to develop some competence in it before they can be held accountable for something, right? And similarly, that's how you go to the other C's as well, right? Where each of these is kind of a thing that says, if you don't have it, there's probably some problem, right? If you don't get to make decisions that impact you day to day, why? what is, are you able to say, hey, we shouldn't do it this way, we should do it this way? If you can't do that, then how can I hold you responsible for that outcome? So that's where that thinking came from. It's just a simple model. It's not complete. No model is complete, but it gives you kind of a high level way to start thinking about it. And at least I've been surprised, probably, you will too if you try it. A lot of the times you'll see the problem is just one of those things. And there might be more problems later, but first you have to fix these basic things. These are foundations. If you don't fix this, the rest of it, who knows? Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't.
Yeah, that's I totally agree. Um, okay, so another topic. Ashwin, considering your extensive background in the like a tech industry and your current role, could you maybe shed shed some light on your strategy for identifying, attracting, and maybe interviewing those engineering talent in your current company, maybe in your previous roles? Can you talk more about this part?
Sure. Every company, every business, you have certain attributes that you're looking for, right? Obviously, yeah, ultimately, I'm in software engineering jobs and we need software engineers and so on. So that's fine. There's some technical skills that are needed. But you need people who can work within your culture. And what I mean by that is not, hey, who do you enjoy having a conversation with or eating lunch with, but more, you know, again, going back to some of the questions you asked, if you're a remote first company, globally distributed company, okay, do you have that kind of flexibility? Are you able to, accommodate a few sort of maybe calls at inconvenient times once in a while? Or um, are you good at writing? Because if you cannot write, then, you know, you're relying on constantly talking to people, which may or may not happen in a distributed setting. So the way we try to approach it is, first of all, we give the benefit of doubt to the person who's interviewing in terms of, we don't try to decide whether they're going to be able to accommodate time zones or whatever, right? We just say, look, we'll just assume that you're coming in with good intentions. You will. So we try to make sure they have the information, right? So we will tell them, hey, this is, even though yes, it's in the job description or whatever, we will talk to them about the way the team works, the distribution of the team, where all the people are, different countries and different time zones and so on. And then in the interview process itself, we do try to make it as realistic as possible. So we don't try to add a lot of steps. We don't try to do like 7 interviews or 8 interviews or whatever, but we do try to, try to make the job actually, make the interview reflect the actual work that needs to be done. So all of the technical jobs, as well as the jobs in, for example, marketing or product, they involve things like case studies. They involve things like a programming take-home exercise. Um, which we actually pay candidates for. So we pay them a certain amount of money. We allow them to use up to 10 hours to work on the exercise. And then, so let's take an example of infrastructure platform engineering role. We actually have a service running in a Kubernetes cluster and there's some problem, right? And now they have to go in, they have to debug it, they have to fix the problem, they have to submit a PR in the GitHub to fix that code. They have to write an incident report for that incident that they discovered, and the root cause analysis and so on. And so this helps us assess, like, realistically, how does this work? Because you may be in two different time zones, so when they're debugging the problem, you're not around, you're sleeping. How do they do this by themselves? Maybe by the time they wake up or they go to bed, you're only just waking up, but you need to hand off that knowledge of, hey, here's what I've done so far, here's what I found works, here's the changes I made, now you need to take it forward from here. Well, that means you have to be able to write a decent incident report. It has to be clear, it has to be comprehensive. um, so similarly for other roles, we try to do something that kind of reflects the nature of the work, and we are looking for these signals that they have the skills needed to do well in our culture. If you're global first, distributed remote team, well, you need to be able to communicate clearly, because you don't have the benefit of, hey, let's just go to a whiteboard and I'll draw a picture for you. Sorry, actually, you can't do that. You're in, GMT +6 and I'm in GMT -4. We're not going to have that much time to overlap. What do you do, right? So that's, I would say, the core thing. Like, look for the concrete skills that somebody needs to do well in your environment. Um, there's of course other things based on the industry, right? Crypto will have a different skill sets and different kinds of culture than, I don't know, social media or something else, right? So you're looking for some sense of, yeah, there's a reason I like this. There's a reason I enjoy this particular kind of work. This is the type of thing that you have to do in this type of environment, and then you try to intentionally bake those things into your interview process. So you're looking for those specific things, and you have a way to measure them.
So in your company, you don't have any kind of limitations in terms of where to hire. You hire anywhere, right?
We think about it on a role by role basis.
Uh-huh.
And I would say engineering probably majority is in the US, but
Oh,
we
okay.
do have people in Europe. We have,
Hmm.
it's a small team still, right? But we do have
Hmm.
people in Europe. We have a person in Canada. We have a person in Argentina. We have a person in Australia. So there is a fair amount of distribution.
Hmm.
We tend to open roles globally,
Hmm.
but we are kind of trying to be sensitive to, we also don't want to hire somebody and then put them in a bad position just
Yeah.
because they're in a real outlier time zone, right? Where it's very difficult to get an overlap, for example.
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, within certain certain limitations, we do, most of our jobs tend to be, yeah, it doesn't matter where you are.
Hmm. Hmm. And do you find that your talent acquisition strategy kind of different based on like locations, right? When you're recruiting in different locations, is it different or it's the same?
There are some differences, right? We are looking for the skills. The core skills are the same. Um, but I think in terms of when you think about a recruiter, sourcing some talent, how they approach that on a global level is different from how they approach that if they're working within a geo, right? So, for example, there might be certain conferences that certain skill set, people with a certain skill set attend. Um, how do you find them, and how do you reach them first to present that, hey, there is this opportunity that you might be interested in. How you use sort of social media to publicize your openings and the skill sets that you're looking for. So there are some subtle differences. It's difficult to have a very targeted kind of outreach. So if there's a very particular position that's hard to fill, it's difficult to have a targeted and global strategy. If you're going wide, you cannot also go deep. It's it's just the laws of physics. And so, yeah, it's kind of how you use these tools to get in front of the right people. There does tend to be some differences. I think from our standpoint, we don't. I personally am not trying to be the expert in how to do global hiring versus local hiring or something like that. We do try to find folks who think about this every day, and so we work with recruiting firms and recruiters who have built their strategies for this. Um, and both at VMware, actually at Citrix as well, and here, we do occasionally bring on, contract-based folks as well, and that, especially if you work with a contracting firm, like a services firm, it gives you, a chance to tap into it a different way, right? You get to offload some of your responsibility to the firm that you're working with, and they can take care of finding the talent and so on. So we do have a few folks on the team. They're also distributed. One of them is Argentina. One of them is in Brazil, I think. One of them is in Ukraine. And so it's kind of, yeah, we get to sort of tap into these folks by working with by partnering with an agency, rather than by trying to sort of figure it all out ourselves.
Awesome. And for those talent who are based maybe like you mentioned in Latin America or maybe in Europe, Eastern Europe, Ukraine, what should they keep in mind while trying to get into companies like Zero X Labs? How they can become a part of your company?
Yeah, so I think in crypto, there's a lot of open source activity, right? A huge, huge, huge amount of open source activity. And so the barrier to entry in some way is a little lower. You can see, for example, our smart contracts in GitHub. right? And you can maybe contribute if you have that skill. We do in fact have a person on the team who joined us because he reported a sort of a, you can call it an exploit in the or a vulnerability. Um, and so it gives you sort of that angle to get in and to make yourself visible. We run continuous bug bounties, right? That's another way to go explore it, and maybe you find something really difficult, right? And then we say, okay, well, if you can find this out, you probably have really good skills. Let's talk. Um, and of course, there's our engineers are on, we have a Discord, and obviously we attend conferences and things like that globally. And so I would say, seek people out at those conferences, go talk to people and share with them sort of what you know, what you're learning, what you're interested in, and kind of create a bit of that connection. Because I think it's easy to say that, oh yeah, we hire from anywhere, therefore everybody has access. But in reality, there's some, how do you actually make yourself visible, right? There's if you have hundreds of thousands of people who could apply, well, how do you how do you shine within that group? And so it is also like the candidates or the engineer's responsibility to go reach out, to make the connection, to do that upfront work, to say, okay, here's an example of what I can do with my skills. Why don't you take a look, right? And then talk to people at conferences and online forums and things like that to really make that connection and find somebody who's taking a close look at your work, right? And then if your work is good, yeah, many of these companies, 0x included, are very friendly to remote hiring and so on. Yeah, there's definitely opportunity there.
I guess we're good. Thank you very much, Ashwin, for sharing your insights, your thoughts. Thanks for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I'd appreciate your having me on.